it's time to take a closer look at the historical roots of law. Laws in the form of community-enforced rules have existed from the time people started to interact. Early communities created laws related to hunting, ownership of property, family relationships, and responsibilities. Most were based on common sense or practicality and were passed on by word of mouth to future generations. As people started to trade with other nations, laws became more complex and it was necessary to put them in writing. Between 1280 and 880 BC, lawmakers in India recorded the great laws of Manu, compiled laws passed on for generations in oral tradition. China also had a set of written laws, the Chinese Code of Liquor, written around 350 BC. They covered things like theft, robbery, prison, and arrest. Laws around the world have much in common. Property rights, slavery, treatment of women and children. Many of these have affected Canada's present legal system. One of the earliest sets of written laws were discovered in Iran by French archaeologists in 1901. Hammurabi was the king of Babylon. He codified the rules and penalties for every aspect of Babylonian life. He attributed the laws to gods to get compliance. Here are some tidbits of Hammurabi's code. Commit a robbery, be put to death. Open your ditches to water your crops and flood a neighbor's, pay for it. If your wife gets sick and you want to marry someone else, the rule was keep the first one in the house and support her, and marry the second one. You want to hire your daughter out to work or to sell her as a concubine or to serve a god in a nunnery, go for it. Commit adultery, both parties are put to death by drowning. If you hit your father, you'll lose a hand. This was a patriarchal society in which the wealthy were given more protection in law than the poor. Slavery was legal. Women and children were considered the property of men. There was also a clear hierarchy of power. Gods at the top, king, male nobles, their wives and children, poor and slaves at the bottom. Many of the laws were based on retribution, and distinction was not made between an accident and a deliberate action. For example, if a doctor operates on a patient and the patient dies, so does the doctor. Restitution seems more reasonable and just. Restitution is the concept of making payment to the victim of the crime, and it was common in the event of damage or theft. It was recognized that people should not lie, especially at a trial. The strong should protect the weak. So in some ways, even these earliest laws have influenced our current system. One of the greatest influences on our law is biblical law, also known as Hebrew law or Mosaic law. In the Bible, we are told that Moses climbed Mount Sinai, where God gave him laws to be followed, the 10 Commandments. These laws and other Mosaic laws were written 500 years after the death of Hammurabi, but the principles were similar. Under Mosaic law, you are forbidden to commit murder, adultery, theft, and to worship other gods. This is an example how laws evolve. Mosaic law was more concerned with punishing a deliberate action than an accidental act of harm. It was also more likely to punish the guilty party than permit a person of high status to shift punishment. Care for the poor was a great concern in Mosaic law. The first form of democracy was born in Greece, though it wasn't democracy as we know it today. Only citizens, a small percentage of the population, had political rights. Excluded were women, children, aliens, and slaves. Athenian citizens were expected to participate in major decisions affecting the running of the country. Voting was a major responsibility, and so was jury duty. The jury system can be traced to Athens in approximately 400 BC. They used democracy to decide on the sentence of the accused. If the person were found guilty, the accused and the accuser would suggest a sentence, and then the jury voted. Roman law had two basic principles. First, the law must be recorded, and second, justice could not be left in the hands of the judges alone to interpret. The laws were codified and could be revised when needed. The 12 tablets among the earliest Roman codes were written on wood and bronze in 450 BC. They were compiled by a committee of 10 men. Roman law became the law of England during the Roman occupation, and it is the foundation of modern law. After 395 BC, the Roman Empire split into the Byzantine Empire and the Western Roman Empire. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian commissioned 10 men to study and clarify 1,600 blocks of Roman law. It inspired the modern concept of justice. Justice is derived from his name. It formed the basis of civil law, the laws governing personal relationships, and it also became the main legal systems to govern Western civilizations, France and thus French Canada. The French Revolution took place 1,200 years after Justinian rule. Napoleon Bonaparte gained power, and in order to unify French law, he commissioned a new code of laws, the Napoleonic Code, or the French Civil Code. It came into effect in 1804 and spread throughout most of Europe. These laws were a compromise between Justinian law and Germanic law. It was non-technical and so very accessible to the public. It regulated civil matters, property, wills, contracts, and family law. It did not have any criminal law.